Hello, listener. I want to remind you to check out my new Ultra TriFest coming to Whistler, British Columbia in August 2024. It has 5 racing formats to choose from, and the feature event will be the new Ultra 515 Worldwide Championships, in which racers from every 515 race in the world may attend. Get all the details at ultratrifestcanada.com, and feel free to contact me personally with any questions.
You're listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, the show that invites you into the lives of people who make up the Ultra family. Here's your host for these conversations, Larry Ryan.
Thanks, Mary Jo. Today, I have a very special episode. I have invited a whole group of people to talk about the state of Ultra Triathlon. And for all of our friends racing at Ultraman, Florida this weekend, good luck. Welcome to a very special 515 event. Today, I am hosting a 515 virtual roundtable discussion about the current state of the sport and where it may be going. All of my guests have appeared on the podcast in the past, so if you wish to hear more about them or the events that they are affiliated with, please check out the podcast library. And because we have a large group of athletes and race directors gathered here from around the world, I will try to give a very brief introduction to allow us to get on with this. Joining me today are the first person crowned an Ultraman, Kurt Madden, crew member for Tom Price, who was the winner at the first Ultraman Canada in 1993 and 10 times racer himself, Nick Mallett, an athlete with so many events around the world that have ultra or extreme in their title that I can't even count them, bringing us his European perspective, Peter Fabrizic, and another European joining from the UK, race director of UMUK, Ben Parison. Joining from Brazil, one of the race directors for UB 515, Alex Luna. Another Southern Hemisphere race director, Jeff Morris, who runs the Australia. And the man who needs no introduction, Steve King. Welcome all.
Hello, Larry.
Morning.
I would like to point out that I did invite Jen McVeigh to represent her 2 Ultraman events, but she was unable to attend our virtual meeting today. And as I said at the top, I would like to talk about where the state of 515 is today, now that it has spread around the world and we have all these people to come and speak about it. I truly appreciate you all joining me from your different time zones to have this discussion. It was not an easy thing to organize, but I appreciate your flexibility. So perhaps I can start with the man who was the first Ultraman finisher ever back in 1983 in Hawaii. Kurt, could you please tell us briefly what parts of the event, not just the 3 days of racing, would we recognize today from that first event, for some historic perspective and, before we discuss some of the current races?
Yeah, I think I can actually remember that long ago. Believe it or not, that was back just after the 70s. So the thing that I reflect on almost daily, and I think it's a good reflection, is that we didn't quite know what it was going to turn into. It was kind of like the point of conception, the genesis. And instantly what came into the environment, maybe because it was the setting of the Big Island, was Ohana. It was that natural, organic ecosystem that it's the vibe, it's the wind, it's the surreal, it's, everything. It's so humbling. You have to have so much grit. And I think we were like those early pioneers. We didn't know. Columbus was, he was going to find, the new world. And I think for us at the time that, Kona was definitely happening, but no one had actually ever gone around the Big Island. So at that age, I figured, what the heck, I'll throw in my hat. And before I knew it, I'm like, okay, bring it, let's just do the swim and we'll get to the other side of the island. We'll bike on the second day and then we'll have this wonderful run from Hawaii all the way back to Kailua Kona. And I think at that point, I didn't want to overthink it because I probably wouldn't have started it or woke up every day, but it was at Ohana. It was us helping each other. And then I fast forward to the last time I did, the Ultraman in 2019, and Steve was there, and instantly it hadn't changed at all. It was like a movie that we literally stopped. The characters have changed. We got a little bit older, a little bit more scruffier, but it was that vibe. And that was the thing that people are like, oh my gosh, this is like, it hasn't changed at all. And then I crewed for somebody in Ultraman Arizona, just a couple of years ago, and it was ditto. And I'm now preparing two people for Ultraman races, and I see the exact same thing. So as we look at all the different ecosystems and all the different races, the thing that I see today, just like in the beginning, is just that Ohana. And in a perfect world, in a perfect galaxy, in a perfect universe, with the 515, we're going to keep this going for years and years and years. Kind of that Jim Collins built to last forever.
Yeah, well, thanks for that early perspective, and I think that's what we will all be coming back to is the Ohana time and time again when we're speaking about not only the past but the present and where the future of this race is. In the early years, the Hawaii race grew kind of year by year to over 50 athletes in the late 80s. I believe in 1991, and Steve's probably got all this better than me, there was no race. And then in 92, there were a group of German athletes who wanted to come and race. I think Curtis was kind of done with it at the time, and he turned it over to Jane. She shared that story in season 1 when she was on the podcast. But then it kind of led a little bit further along into 1993 when Ultraman Canada came to help build up the sport even more with Steve Brown. And that's where Steve King and, Nick kind of come aboard in the Canadian side, racing in the second edition, where I believe, Nick, you bested Steve just a little bit on that one. Perhaps we can have you two discuss a little bit about how Canada helped evolve the scene of 515, because I know Steve Brown deserves a lot of credit in what he did and how he was a major influence on the sport. So perhaps, Steve, maybe you first, and then Nick, give us a little perspective on, how was it different or the same of what was happening in Hawaii at that time? And then, a little bit of background of what Steve Brown brought to the races.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think one of the things, obviously, that is so different for each event is the course. And that's something that is difficult for each of the race directors to take on. I've been fortunate enough myself to get to quite a few of the different events, including the UK, including Mexico, and including Australia, as well as Arizona, Florida, and Hawaii and Canada. So I can vouch for some of the different courses. And I think that's one of the things that's so wonderful, even though, I'm a stats man, so I love to look at times and see what sort of speeds people are doing, or I love to see just how close people have gotten to making it on time, or see people like Van being 19, or other people being in their 60s and getting there, and other people who have missed out and come back maybe 1 or 2 times to try and become an official finisher. But Steve took on quite a big challenge in hosting an event. And I think that's something else we have to bear in mind is anyone that takes on race directing an Ultraman distance event, they love the sport. I haven't met a race director who does not absolutely love the sport. It is not a moneymaker. That's something that, really is it has to be taken into account. And people sometimes look at the entry fees and wonder, oh man, I only pay this for a local race. Yeah, but there's a huge difference here when you look at what it takes to cover the distances. And so when we hosted the first one, some of the finishes were similar, but not the same. The courses have changed quite a bit. But the similarities we have are, it is around the South Okanagan, which is the hottest place in Canada for anyone who's never been here before. A lot of people think, it could be pretty cold up here, and it can be at different times. Like right now, we've had a really dodgy winter with a cold break just a little while ago. But in the heat of the summer, it can be blisteringly hot. And people do try to prepare for each event they're doing. We've been fortunate enough in quite a few races as well, where we've seen people who have come here to try and qualify. That's become something over the years, of course, that now is different. Initially, there were no qualifiers to get to the World Championships, of course, until we started hosting events in a number of different locations, and then people would want to go to World Championships. However, if you look at when Kurt did his first race, I think it was 28 years of age, and there were like 22 finishers. This year, there were 15 finishers. It's not to say people don't want to be there, but we also have to look at the costs. The reason I did the race in 94 was because I was lucky enough to call the race and follow it in 93. And I thought, wow, this is on my doorstep. I've got to do this, and that's something that you'll find everywhere when you look at whether it's in the Czech Republic, in Brazil, in the UK, certainly in Australia, where the numbers have really gotten up there. But back to your question, Nick was the pre-race favorite. There was no doubt about that. He can swim really strongly. He's a great biker, and I think he's off around Australia again very soon on his bike. And so I was nowhere near him. Basically, I think we were like 45 minutes apart at the end of the 3 days, but he was a superb champion. And so we've always been pleased when he's come back. But I love the fact that nearly everyone I see here, and I don't know Ben, I've never met Ben before, but I know how keen he is. When you look at the numbers, they've hosted a race with just 2 people before, just to make sure that it went around. And so with Nick, he's a stats man as well. I love it when I read the comments. We're the people that get onto different sites and comment to try and encourage others to take on these challenges. In Australia, they seem to have a magic formula. Not only is it a great race and great people since day one, but it's a superb location. Noosa, if you've never been there, tremendous place. But we like to think Penticton because we hosted our first Ironman here in 1983. So 10 years later, the first Ultraman. And so we've had a number of people who've done Ironman who've said, well, I'm ready for something different. Nick was ready for something different, came away as a winner, and as won again. And but he loves the stats, and I'll shut up right now because I'm probably going on too long. So anyway.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, well, for me, there's a huge personal connection with both Steves, Steve King and Gene, and Steve Brown and Maria. And I've spent summers living in both their homes. I've lived in Steve Brown's store for 2 summers, and we did nothing in the 90s but talk about Ultraman Canada specifically. After I won my first one, and then I crewed for a few, getting the numbers in Canada was difficult. So they introduced teams to get numbers and then dropped the teams once it grew. But I think if you speak to Luna and Van and Simon Smith back in the day in the UK and Tony, Steve Brown set the template for what Ultraman is today. The way it's run, the progression of the whole week. And I know your ex, Lucy, she actually transcripted the Ultraman Canada documents to suit Australia. Tony had to do that. Van's done the same thing. I know Sway Lively did the same thing. So, Steve, the first year of Canada, it was very similar to Hawaii. The potluck celebration afterwards, it was a barbecue in the park at the conservatory there in Penticton. But Steve then decided, no, he wanted to upgrade it a little bit. So started with the salmon dinners, and it became now, I believe, Tony Horton has made probably what is the standard, the highest standard you could possibly do for an Ultraman race. And he lifted what Steve did to what his magnificent race in Noosa. It's got the location, he's got the 5-star resort, he's got everything. And I think to watch the progression over the years, and Hawaii had to follow it, and they've done a good job in following it. So I think that's Steve Brown's legacy. And as you said, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for the work he put in. And that has been my one and only issue over the years. And so with it's a shame he's not here, but I know he's your classic Canadian, doesn't want to get involved, doesn't want to deal with arguments. And so he's probably going to watch this, and more power to him. He deserves a 3 cheers from all of us.
Absolutely. So as you're saying, it does start to build up again now with the 2 races, with Steve building up in Canada. And after some up and down years for participant numbers, where some years the races weren't even happening, and things go on an upswing again around 2010. And that's when I was first introduced to the sport, when Lucy was participating. And in 2011, they start their next generation of expansion, and that's when UMUK came in. Now, Ben, I know that you are a more recent custodian of the event, but Van and Steve were there early on. And Ben, perhaps you can describe a little bit about how the event is run now. As Steve was saying, you've done it with just 2 people to keep that thing going. And I know when you were previously on the podcast, you mentioned that things are really pared down there compared to some of these traditional things that are happening around Ultraman events. But like Van, you were inspired as an athlete to become a race director, so that race did not die. Tell us a little bit about your event, and I know it's one of the smaller ones. Yeah.
So in 2015, when I did it, one of my friends, Darren, he was my support crew. He was going to do it in 2017, and I was going to be his support crew. And he found out that the company was closing, so they were, it wasn't going to go anymore. UMUK, and Darren, my friend Darren, came to me and said if he wanted to take it on, and I didn't hesitate. I love the event. I love the venue, the place. It's not on a national park. It's just beautiful. And I didn't want the race to die. But when Darren and my wife Claire and when we took on UMUK, it was never a business decision. It was always as a hobby, something we are passionate about, but not to make money. And that's something that also, I think one of the, I think it was Steve who mentioned as well, it's not to make money. It's just because we are passionate about the format. For us is the venue in the UK, Wales, North Wales. So yeah, we took it on in 2017, and we put our first race in 2018. Yeah, only with a couple of people. And what we had to do then is decided, how we were going to carry on with the race.
So that's when you kind of decided to pare things down a little bit more.
Yeah. So
the events of it. Tell us how you did that.
So the first thing, we came 2017 and we invested in the new website. We changed the routes slightly to make it more difficult because it wasn't difficult enough. Chose a couple of places we really loved, and so changed the route a bit, not too much. But then we streamlined and we eliminated both the pre-race reception and the award banquets. We run in 2019, and then obviously COVID hit in 2020. But I had some ideas how to streamline even more, and COVID, what COVID did was accelerate those ideas. So what I did was that the health and safety briefing. So instead of spending the whole Thursday, for us would be the day before Thursday, doing the bike checks and the safety briefings and and all the documents you have to sign, the paperwork. We've done that online now. So the health and safety brief is a nice PowerPoint presentation, and what we do with live session, Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions about the health and safety briefing or anything about the race.
And how do you do your awards banquet now as well?
No, we don't.
Not at all.
No.
It's finish line awards.
No. So everybody gets their medal. and everybody gets to get home.
Yeah.
It's one thing that I learned, and I know that I'm the new kid in town, the new boy in town. You guys have tons of experience, but I've done a few races, and I was never bothered. And this is the same feeling my wife and who also used to race, and my friend Darren, is that we went there for the trophies. We went there for all the stuff. We were there just to enjoy ourselves during the competition, during the race, and then get your medal and then go home, have a shower, and then enjoy that. But we thought, that should be the way. Am I right or wrong? This is our thinking.
Yeah.
Everybody gets a medal. I do, I do say who is the winner, but they know who's the winner because everybody stays looking at the times. But this race is, at least the one I'm trying to host, UMUK, is a race for the athlete and for the support crew to enjoy it, have fun. But it's not, if you want to brag about it, just go down the pub with your friends in your own time, and you can brag about it.
Yeah,
it's not.
It definitely sounds a little more old school, a little more rootsy. It's I think one of the things that people enjoy about going to the 515 events is the awards dinner where they get to mix and mingle and tell stories. But you're just saying, hey, you can take that to the pub with you, and we can save a few bucks on that end. So I appreciate that part of your race.
To be honest, perhaps it's because it's a very slow race, but by day 2, all the support crews are talking to each other. They are meeting after the race, so they are doing that already, and by day 3, everybody's, we all go to the pub after the race finish, if you finish at a reasonable time, because I tend to wait for the last runner. I don't close the race.
Yeah.
I allow them to come anytime they want to. I just want to make sure that they finish the race. The way we based our race is something that they can enjoy, have fun. It's tough, but they're going to, they're going to take a lot of memories from the race. And it won't be the medal, in front of everybody and getting the claps. It will just be the whole journey before the race and the 3 days they're going to be racing. So that's my take anyway.
Thank you. Alex, how about your races that you've done in Brazil now? You started in 2014, I believe. You have legends like Corey Folk helping you, who's completed 36 Ultraman races, if I got that number correct. Curtis Tyler, the man who started Ultraman in Hawaii, is a big supporter of yours. How do people like that shape your event? How much of yours is still like the tradition, and how has it changed over the years?
Well, first, I would like to, in advance, apologize for my poor English for everyone. So my English is not very good. So I'll try to do my best to make myself as most understandable as I can. And I would like to point out, another 2 names here in our race that helps us a lot is, Alexandre Ribeiro, of course. It's a person that we all love very, very much here in Brazil. And Sergio Cordeiro, which at the age of 70 years now, my friends, still in action. And he just won last year, here in Brazil, the 5, Ironman distance in sequences in a row in Utah, and he's coming also. So these names are very important for us in Brazil. So yes, we started down in 2014. Actually, the history goes back to Ultraman Canada in 2007. I will be very quick here. When I went to crew for my dear friend Paulo Calil, and that's where I met, Nick, and I met you, Steve King, and I met Jane, and it was, I went to crew for him, and it was, I know it's a cliche, and I'll refer to a lot of cliches here that we all know, but it was life-changing, and it was a experience that was beyond my expectations. And that's where I met Jane. And I remember, at the end of day 2 in Ultraman Canada, we were, a small city. I won't recall the name, but just, I was so excited. I turned to her and asked, Jane, can I go to Hawaii? And I didn't know anything about how to go to Hawaii. And she just, looked at me, gave that very serious look. And, she waited to respond like 3 or 4 seconds. So that's when I understood how, there was a process. But, Jane, being Jane, as we all know, she just looked at me and said, yes, and then you can. So I went to do my Ultraman Hawaii race in 2008, and it changed my life. I swim badly, I bike badly, I run badly, but I just love the sport. I love the training, I love the lifestyle. And there was something that was missing. I didn't do much Ironmans. I did 10 Ironmans by the time that I went to Ultraman Hawaii. But at that time, I needed something different. Alex was already, 3 times world champion. And when we came back, we talked about doing a race in Brazil. But as you know, I work for a company, I have kids, we all have to do, we don't live of doing Ultraman races. So it took a while, And in 2014, I was talking to Alex, Paulo, and Corey. And then Corey, with his, usual Hawaiian wisdom, I told him, look, Corey, we don't have, I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. And so I opened it up to him, my planning, my Gantt chart with the things that I had to do, the previous things I had to do, everything very specific. And then Corey, with his wisdom, told me, look, Luna, if you think that way, the event will never happen. Just let the event happen. So that's what we did. We did in 2014 a 9 guys race, and we did it in Hawaii. Alex chose the course. It's a beautiful place here in Rio de Janeiro, in the state of Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, in São Paulo. So we were, during the years 15, 14, 16, we were all getting more experience. And Corey helped us very, very much. Alex helped us very, very much with that. To be perfectly honest, I didn't want, it was very hard for me to say at the beginning, before 2014, I didn't have, the maturity to say to Alex and Paulo and Corey that I didn't want to do the race. I didn't want it to do, it was hard for me to tell these guys that I didn't want it. But after I did the first time, in 2014, we did the first time, 14, it was a life-changing experience. So I can say that as a triathlete, I'm quite a good race director, So over the years, we had all the pains, and the learning process of doing this race. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down, a few things that you guys said. I think that you're right, Steve. This is not a race. You're doing, organizing a 515 race is not a money maker, And I got trouble. I got trouble in my wedding because of that, In 2018, my wife told me, you're not going to take more money from us. If you want to keep up with the race, you just make it break even. What are you going to do? That's your problem. I don't care. But I don't want you to take more money from us, okay, from our family to put up the race. And
I think Steve Brown heard that from Maria every year as well.
Yeah.
And, I'm thankful to my wife, because I will finish shortly, because that was really changing. Because for the first time, I saw organizing a race in a professional perspective, So look, I have to do this race to make it, break even. And of course, we have to deal with the consequence of that decision. And the first one, which is really hard, is to increase entry fee. That's very hard because it limits, other athletes to go into. our races are very expensive. I saw what you wrote, Kurt. Can you imagine $23,000? If you put that in Brazilian money, it's 150 reais. It's very, very expensive. Even here in Brazil, for athletes, Brazilian local athletes and South American athletes to come to Brazil and race our race, it's very expensive. So what I can say to you guys to finish, I don't want to take any more time, but we came up with a more professional way in the last 5 years. But one thing that we really discuss about, and I want to point out that I'm not, of course, there is a hard, a group of small people that organize more races, but we're talking about 15 people around Brazil. Everyone stops what they're doing in a year and they come down to races organizer. I'm not the only organizer, and that's one of the beauty of the race. But one thing that we really are concerned every year is that despite the fact that we try to put it in a more professional way, we never to lose Aloha, Ohana, and Kokua. That is the most important thing. We see this race, I know it's a cliche, but we don't see this race as an end to itself. It must be a way to something bigger. And as we always say to our athletes, look, and we're telling to our 2024 athletes now, look, we're really grateful and we're doing the best to give you the best race in 2024, but it will be dated on your lives. UB 515, 2024 will be dated in your lives, but this event has to give you a legacy that goes much more beyond than the sport itself, that it will affect your business lives, if you're a husband, if you're a father, things that we all know because we experience Ultraman. It goes much more beyond the sport. So yes, to finish my answer, Larry, that's how we went through the event in the last years. And we do emulate Hawaii, but we do that. But we try to make it, every year more in bringing some of our Brazilian culture to the event because we really understand that Aloha, Ohana, Kokua, although it's from Hawaii, it has no borders, it has no countries. Sorry for taking a long time to answer your question.
No, that was an excellent answer. And I think that is what rings true for all of the race directors on the screen and all the athletes who are doing these races over and over again too. So we appreciate you keeping to that as well. Now, Jeff, I know that you are newer to the Australia and haven't been there for the full history since it started in 2015, when it was also part of a Ultraman expansion. You've taken over this very successful event. And as Nick said earlier, your races are often sold out and they give the full experience. They are kind of the pinnacle of what's going on. That obviously doesn't come without a cost as well, as we're talking about expenses. And that's one of the things I want to talk more about as a group in a few minutes, is the expense of what's happening in these races. But what have you been looking at changing or not changing now as the person who's taken over this race? And what's like the stuff that you just have to hold on to?
So I was there from the start, not as an organizer, but I was 2015. I was crew for my best friend in that race. So,
okay. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. So I guess, it was never my intent to become part of it. I had no idea what it was. I was at that stage in training for my first Ironman. I was really quite new to the sport. So I came in cold. And it's been mentioned already. I think Alex said it's cliche, but nothing says it. It is life-changing. And in 2015, as I said, I hadn't even yet done my first Ironman, and I came in and joined Hayden. I'd been training with him, so I kind of knew what was upcoming for him. And it was life-changing, even for me as a crew member. And I guess that's part of what I think the 515, this experience is. It doesn't just change the lives of the athletes, it changes the lives of everyone that it touches. There's a lot of things running through my head, like Kurt mentioned about the cost. Yep. And I don't think we can change that. It costs a lot to do these races in general for an athlete. But it's such an amazing experience. For some people, it's one and done. That's probably the majority of our athletes. They do it once and then they move on, but they keep that experience with them for the rest of their lives. And it's why we try and make it really special. It's why I've maintained that level of what goes on in the race, because we've put our entry fee up a little bit this year to try and reach that break even. A number of people have mentioned that as well, and I know that Tony has bankrolled basically throughout, because it's never broken even. I'm trying to get it to break even for sustainability, so that people can always experience this in future. And the reality is they're going to drop in Australian dollars, $2,500. I think Kurt's number was 25,000, and I probably don't doubt that for someone to come and do this race, you look at airfares, accommodation, all those things. It is big dollars. Now, whether you do a lap course or what we do, where we do have an amazing place, don't get me wrong, Tony and Craig and Nick worked really hard on getting that course we have in Noosa, but it's amazing, and it makes that experience something absolutely spectacular. So that money that you put down, kind of without belittling it, because money makes the world go round, but you kind of forget you spent all that money because you've got this experience that you've taken with you. So we'll continue to do what we've done. We will have our early check-in and things on the Thursday. We have slightly modified this year, where we're having a more social breakfast before our big race and safety briefing on the Friday, so that people can be settled, crews get to know each other, athletes get to know each other. You build that family feeling that is just integral to these events. Mm-hmm. They have their 3 days, and then yes, we're blessed with the location we have. Once again, we have an amazing resort where we do our presentations on the Tuesday. But if that wasn't available, you would find a way to make it special, because to me, that is what makes these races so important. I say to a number of athletes, we get our applications. I talk to a lot of our athletes because unfortunately we have to pare it down. We do have people we have to say no to. And I talk to them, and the athletic exploits is one thing, but the second thing is the crew. And I want to know that people have talked about their crew, because I say to them, an athlete can get to the start line of this race, but no athlete gets to the finish line without their crew. So that crew is so important. And at our presentation dinner, we don't have 50 or 55 athletes. We have 220 participants, because those crew are just so important. And that's the beautiful feeling about this race, is that you all feel really integral to it. So yeah, we're not going to change our formula. We've tickled it up a little bit. It was mentioned that it's come from Steve Brown, and I know Tony worked really closely with Steve Brown back in the day, and we pay respect to what's gone before us, and want to maintain that. And I think that's really important. So that's my job as custodian of this race, and the overall feeling of what we're doing. So we'll keep doing what we're doing, and putting on that amazing experience in just this spectacular course that we get to enjoy here. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting, all of the people that are race directing kind of just fell into it. And it's the same for Van Sanchez. He had such a great experience at the UMUK that he wanted to take that back to Mexico. And Van was supposed to be with us on this call, but somehow has missed it. So we still want to make sure we pay our respects to Van and the things that he's doing down in Mexico. But yeah, it's interesting how people, and like yourself, I've not raced a 5:15 event. I came through it through my now ex-wife Lucy, and I think everybody knows that by now. But fell in love with the sport as well. And yeah, it's not just the racers. I think everybody has that experience, and that's amazing.
I was running a long course event, so I still run that for my club here in Hervey Bay. So it's 100K. It's a 70.3-ish kind of race. Mm-hmm. So I guess I took some of that experience in a race. It was different, it's bigger numbers, but it's still pretty special. It's a club race. It's a 70.3 with a soul, if you like. But it couldn't lose money. That's the reality. It's a club race. We had to always run it. The club didn't have a bankroll, that it always had to run. And that was when I kind of stepped into UM. I looked at some of that stuff and made sure that, that it was sustainable long term,
Right.
from an athlete point of view and a financial point of view.
Mm-hmm. Peter, we haven't had a chance to hear from you yet, so I do want to give you a chance to get your voice in here. You can kind of give us a perspective of not only your experiences, your 515 experiences, but all the other ultra races that you do around the world. I think yours are mainly Eurocentric, but I know you've been to Florida. You've raced at UltraCzech 515 multiple times, and you've been the winner there multiple times. So kind of taking in all of the events that you do, maybe with a focus toward the UltraCzech 515. Can you tell us a little bit from your perspective, what do you feel are the more memorable and more needed things at events? Maybe not just required. And when you think about other events and how they handle the actual racing check-in rules, awards, et cetera, and all of that, what do you see as a racer on all of these different parts of the event that you go to?
I was really enjoying myself listening to all of you. Plenty of wisdom, and I hope I won't be called to speak as well, because it's really nice to listen to this set of people. But as for a point of view, I'm a little bit of an athlete. I'm a little bit of an organizer. So I'm helping the guys to organize the Czech 515 race. I will cut my Ironman races away. We've all done some, and it's nothing we need to discuss today. I think the same for my Antarctic marathons and 100K races and stuff like that. It would take a long time to talk about it, so I'll cut it down straight to 515 distance racing or Ultraman distance racing. So far, I've done point-to-point races like Kona. I did Israel from north to south. I did Ultraman Florida. All those races are amazing and perfect, I would say, lifetime dream to come true for most triathletes who feel like they can do long distance over 3 days. But the idea about around Ultraman in Czech Republic, for many reasons, one of that would be the cost, as everybody talked about already today. Going to Kona is with your own crew is tremendously expensive for European. Same with Israel or Florida. Then the safety reasons, spending 2 days on the road and third day running on the road as well with the traffic sometimes can get really tricky. The thing we managed to create, or the main reason why we created the loop race in UltraCzech was the safety first, then the expenses for the athletes. And at the end, after doing that race 3 times myself and comparing it to Kona, Florida, or Israel Ultraman races, I would say it's surprisingly to every athlete who's ever done it, is amazing experience, especially for the crews and for athletes as well. As the thing is, with 5K loop, you're watching water on your one side and trees on the other side. You won't meet a single car through the 3 days. And you will meet every single athlete on that course multiple times. Like the slowest cyclist on the road meets the fastest cyclist on the road and has a chance to talk to each other 17 times through the second day. And that's something which I've never experienced at other Ultraman distance races. And that's something which brings people back to that specific race. And when I'm talking about crews, that's even better story. Because if you get a puncture on that course, you would have 17 crews working on your repairs. It basically takes a minute for you to change your flattened wheel, because everybody's sitting on the same spot on their chairs, talking together, enjoying, cheering all the athletes, not just my athlete, but all other athletes as well. If somebody runs out of the energy drink, bars, gels, anything, you have 17 replacements within 3 minutes. So one thing is how we as athletes enjoyed it. The other thing is that's the only race where my parents are able to support me. They would never be able to drive car abroad, even travel abroad, and then drive the car from north to south of Israel. They would always come with me to TriFest or Czech 515 because they sit on the chair, and I tell them I'll need a drink, and in 7 minutes I'm back to take it, without them needing to move. And if I get puncture, they have no idea how to change a puncture. But next to them is sitting another crew, and next to them another crew, and they all have an idea. So that's something where you have 3 sets of spare wheels for 20 athletes. That's what it takes. So talking about the costs, this cuts it really down, and that's a perfect way for like an entry race into the distance. And we have athletes who came to TriFest to experience the distance, to test their ability to do it, and then now they're looking for other races abroad. Like actually 3 of us are planning to go to Larry's race in August in Canada, which will be for most of us, very expensive experience. But we're working with Larry on, limiting the costs, and that's the way to go. And that's why I would love to see more races like that around the world. Of course, you can't tell anyone to do it this way, but I think it's a nice entryway into the sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as for the organizers, it might seem cheaper, but it's actually not, because we need to rent a rowing channel. And that's why our why our date is moving every year, because we are competing with rowing world championships, kayaking world championships, commercial triathlons, and all the sport events happening at that area. So for us, it's hard to find a proper date for the race, but it's usually from half August to half September, to the end of September, which is perfect weather as well. 20 degrees plus minus.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the main questions that I want to try to get to as well is, what are race directors doing to try and help with the expenses? I mean, in recent years, it seems like everything's gone up at least 25%. And as a result, entry fees are going up. And this was never a sport where people who didn't have means weren't coming to in the first place. So now I want to kind of open up the discussion to just bounce off of each other. We've had a few points made on this already, but are there any other ways to try and get events costs down? What can we reasonably cut out of the experience and still have the experience? And it was great to hear the different ways that people are doing that already. We can't cut down the cost of hotels anymore. Hotels have skyrocketed after COVID. The crews always end up costing money for people that are coming. So if we can just kind of focus on maybe that expense question for a minute, because I know that that's one of the things that has now driven down the number of people that are wanting or able to go and compete at a 515. And it looks like, Peter, you want to go first on this one.
Yeah, if I would like to continue on that concept we created in Czech Republic, and when I'm myself traveling to Ultraman distance races and Ironman distance races for that matter, I'm always trying to limit my costs, because I've pretty much spent my life as a professional triathlete, and my family is used for that I'm actually making a living with triathlon. Not that I'm spending our savings for doing another triathlon. So when I'm traveling myself, I've always raced with local crews, which is an amazing way to meet new people and create new friendships. And we do the same with Czech race. You can, of course, bring your own crew, which is, in our case, pretty much only the cost of the flight to Prague, as the accommodation and meals and everything is right in the channel for very good prices, very cheap prices. So we are not talking fancy hotels and fancy prices, but really good accommodation right by I'm talking 20 meters from the race course.
Right.
And you have, very good standard accommodation with very, very good standard meals. both meals who the rowers at the World Championships are getting. And what we do, we also provide, if somebody needs transfers from Prague Airport, which is about an hour, we provide local crews whenever asked. And that crew doesn't need to have a car, doesn't need to have expensive accommodation. So that's the concept I'm talking about, bringing those costs like, 3, 4, 5 times down compared to some other races where you need to go through the country with the rental car and your own big crew and find all the different hotels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a perspective that I think it makes it a perfect beginner race, but maybe even that's something that more people will look toward, is centralizing it a bit more, or doing those laps.
I think Peter's hit the nail on the head with regards to getting local crews as much as is possible, because you've got a lot of local people who usually form a big part of not just the committee, but the organization, that are very, very connected. In the early days of Ironman, we had hundreds of athletes that had homestays. And here we are now with lots of social media, where I think if more attention is given to in terms of reducing the cost for athletes and crews, that we could potentially utilize homestays. I mean, we've had many people staying with us over the years, not only athletes, but people like Rick Kent, photographers, all the people you need to have as part of the event to make it all happen. And so I think that can certainly help. However, some of the events are held in places where the race directors don't live, such as the UK or Noosa. The race directors are not necessarily living nearby, but they do form usually some great local talent that can help out and do an amazing job at both those events. And I think the more we can utilize that talent, because as well as I do, you get a lot of alumni coming back to support the event in one way, shape, or form, usually as crews or as part of the organizing committee. But a lot of the other people involved are usually locals who are either athletes or just love to volunteer. And once they've volunteered once at an Ultraman, I think they'll come back time and time again. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that may have the connections, if they can't do it themselves, for homestays, which would cut down the cost considerably.
Excellent point.
Yeah, Larry, I'm going to go next off of what Steve said. I think, for me, from the beginning and where I started, and, to fast forward, I really wanted to go back to that 40-year anniversary. And it was unfortunate. It was a perfect storm, because let's be very candid here, which we are. Hawaii is very expensive. But with COVID, when you looked at flights, when you looked at hotels, when you looked at car rentals, that week of Thanksgiving, it was double the price. In other words, I know it's tradition, but sometimes tradition should be altered a little bit, because if we could move that race, for example, a week or two away from that, that cost would have came down extensively. So that's my first point, is the timing of when the races are going to be held. Secondly, I go back, Steve, to the early 80s, that in my first Ultraman, I actually had 2 people that were locals. One was a state senator, and Donna Virginia Isbell. And when I was somehow introduced, I don't know how it all happened. It just kind of fell. I was like so calm, and this is why. They knew every square inch of that island. And just to give me as an athlete that peace of mind, I had nothing to worry about. I'm like, no, she knows every piece of lava. She knows every bike shop. She knows every restaurant. Nothing bad's going to happen, because she knows it, versus I'll bring my crew in. I'll try to give them a quick orientation, but that's not the time and the place to do that. I think the other thing too is, you look at it, it really builds tradition, and it really builds, that ritual of planning it out. And it's so much more comforting. Even when I went to Nice, France, I stayed with the Von Bergs. Wow. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm in this chateau. I've known Rudy for over 40 years. His son is a pro. I'm sitting in their 6-acre resort, pool, everything else. I'm like, this is almost as good as home. And I think that's something that, to bring that expense down, even in Brazil, Carlos Dolabella, my longtime friend from Rio, Santiago, when I'm down there, they're like, no, you are staying with us. And I think for an athlete and to get crews, it's really kind of a no-brainer. And don't get me wrong, it's nice to be able to bring your crew in, but when you start trying to bring in a crew from throughout the U.S. for me to get them to Hawaii,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was trying to run it a little bit lean, and I've got to be responsible for my family and wanting to bring my family over because it was a family deal. So I think if we move the events a little bit and also try to utilize the local resources, because it's a win for them. And then you build the tradition in, they want to be a big part of that. They want to be that bike shop that can be there to help those athletes. And we learn from our failures in life. We learn from adversity. And like we said, that's the beauty of this event is the Ohana. Even I've raced up in Whistler. Oh my gosh. I mean, huge potential right there. So I think we're all on the same page on this, Larry.
Ben, I think you had something you wanted to add.
Well, one thing I wanted to just to put it out there, because I think you mentioned using local crews, and I understand why and how that can help. But I'll give you the other side of the coin, is that from my experience, and this is, not as many years as you guys have done it, but for the last 4 or 5 events I put on, the one thing that the athlete always mentioned is that the race gave them the opportunity to share that experience with the loved ones. So with the best friends, with the daughters, with the sons, with the parents, with the wives or husbands, and that's the, if anything, that's the one thing they take home, is that they managed to finish, get to the finish line all together.
Right.
So I'm just putting that out there. It's just a counterbalance of using local crews, or obviously you have to bring local support, but it has a pros and cons. What I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think every part of the event has its pros and cons for sure. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, I would like to add to that as well. Of course, I really enjoy doing the race with my parents, with my family. It's just the limiter. What we are all talking about is that the number of athletes is not really sky high at most of the 515 events. And I would say that the biggest trouble with higher numbers at the start is just the overall cost of coming to race with your own crew and or rent a car, all the hotels or the flights for your whole group. So it can be done maybe once in a lifetime for most of the athletes. It can never be done for a lot of athletes. So whenever it's possible, I'll try to bring at least one member of my family with me to a race. But it's just a big difference if you can get that locally and you just cut your costs of racing to 1/3, 1/4. I also forgot to answer about the race, let's say, festivities awards. I do think that it's very important for most of the athletes to be recognized among their own peers. We understand that it's not televised to the world, but after spending 3 days on the course, and having some tough battles, like I remember I won Ironman Florida by 3 minutes after really pushing it hard until the very last kilometer of the run. So finally having, after you rest a little bit, meeting all those athletes again, and having nice time to talk about the whole race and clap the hands for everyone in the race who finished in front of you or behind you. Talk to their crews if that was not possible through the race at most races. I don't think that increases the price of the overall experience substantially. It's really marginal given the overall cost of such a race. So I would definitely, from point of athlete and organizer as well, would love to see nice award ceremonies at every race. So that's my take on that. And I would also like to apologize because I'm leaving for Sahara Triathlon tomorrow morning and my family is ready to go sleep. So if there is another question specifically to me, I would answer immediately, and then I would just listen to all remaining answers in your podcast, Larry.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for coming in and doing this. I know you're on a bit of a tight timeline because you're off somewhere every weekend. Please say hello to the Tarzia brothers for me, and I hope you have a great race.
I'm meeting them tomorrow in Algeria.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Wow.
Okay.
And
Pleasure
could
meeting
I-
you guys.
Could I just say, Peter, I hope to see you back at the races. I never forget that brilliant third day there in Florida with you and Ivan Albano. The tactics that were involved, and obviously what you did in 2019 when you won and got that 21-hour, 16-minute clocking. It was a world best, and that's why it's nice that we're doing this so that more people recognize the talent and the athletes and the elites. And I know we may get into that, the pros that are starting to appear and showing us what's possible. And thanks for the years of racing you've put in. It's been a pleasure watching you.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah,
We look forward
it's
to
always
seeing you in
pleasure
Whistler.
listening to you at
Yeah.
the races. Thanks, guys.
Well, I think let's take a moment to start picking up on some of those other topics that I did want to bring out in this roundtable that we're having today. Let's take a look forward, 3, 5, or 10 years down the road. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking, where this is going. So many years of history are here on this screen, hundreds of years of experience combined. So I want to take that look forward as well, and maybe tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on, can the 20 races that are out there now exist? Is there enough athletes for that? We've talked about how in Brazil, it's mostly Brazilians. In Australia, it's mostly Australians. At the Czech race, it's mostly Czechs. Siberman is, I think, exclusively Russians. We have these races around the world that make these great hubs of 515 for their athletes from their countries. And part of the reason I wanted to do this new worldwide championship is to allow those people to move up to that next level and come to a world championship, where Ultraman is obviously keeping theirs within their brand. So with 20 some odd races around the world now, I would assume that there's going to be a want for this. But as I've said, and as you guys have said, the expense of just traveling around the world might not allow that to happen. It might be that we have 20 races around the world and we don't have that coming together anymore. So I'm going to throw it out to you guys. Give me some of your ideas on where you see this going, with Simon Cochran taking the Ultraman world by storm this past year. Will we be seeing more pros? Is it going to turn into an Ironman? Will it remain small? Is it going to be intimate? What do you guys see in the future? And maybe we'll start with Jeff, because I know that one of the things that has come out of the Steve Brown, Nick Rum Nights was the idea of a 355 race. And now you are also the custodian of that for Tony. So let's start with you. I don't know if that's where you wanted to go, but let's start with you and get a little perspective on where you see the future of this going.
So a couple of things. So you touched on people traveling. So we get 10 to 20%. So, 5 to 10 of our field would be internationals. So we get some Indian athletes coming, which I know go to some of the other events around. But we do capture a few, and it kind of goes back around to that experience and where is your race and what are you doing? Because people come and it becomes a holiday. It's a racecation. So people generally want someone to come with them. They're not going to travel alone to these things because it is an experience. So having a race when and where is a attractive location. And I know Kurt touched on when is the race in Hawaii, and there was some agreement there about we need to be flexible. Now, our race is in the low season in Noosa. I'm going to laugh. It's for Australians. It's getting a bit cold. It dips into the low 20s Celsius. So Noosa and a beach location becomes a little bit less of an attraction for local people, but for internationals, it's magic. It's better than your summers, really, for most of the northern hemisphere. So maintaining that experience, I think, is important, and people will travel. as far as a world championship goes, or something like that, where the best come together, that can be problematic because not everyone's doing it for either that recognition or prepared to drop the amount of money that it would cost to do big international fairs. And I don't. That's not getting down on anyone. That's just a fact of life that to fly anywhere is, in the thousands of dollars. You then multiply that by people, it gets out of hand. So, um, and yes, we've kicked off Ultra 355 as it's a number of things. It's a great goal in an athletic pursuit, full stop, to do that. It's something a bit epic. It's beyond that IM stuff where obviously a lot of people want to be, but we bring back all those values that exist in 515 racing and try and build that family spirit. And yeah, for some people, it's a stepping stone. We probably don't push that too much because for some people, 355 kilometres of racing over 3 days is as far as they will go. And that is a spectacular achievement. We don't want to push it as this stepping stone and belittle those people that have achieved it because it's a great achievement. But we do want to see some people take on Ultra 355 and go on to a 515 race, go on to Australia here or something else. And we think it's a bit more achievable being a non-crewed race. Is that the race that we're talking about that doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a but it's still something people achieve and people might travel for. And we've got, I think I've now up to 6 Australians coming to Cozumel in April for a racecation. They're going to come, they're going to have a race and have a bit of a holiday in Cozumel because it's a fantastic location and we time it, it's away from spring break and a few of those things so that it's affordable for people to get to for a bit of a holiday. But let's throw in a race. Why wouldn't you do 355 kilometres of triathlon on your holidays? So that's what we're aiming for when we look at locations and times to do these races of the 355 ilk for us as we try and grow that. And we being me and Tony and the few people that hang around our events and help us with them, Nick included. So that's where we're going with Ultra 355.
Right. And Nick, maybe you want to chime in on this because you are that guy that's just going to go throw in a 355. Maybe you might walk up to it just like, oh, there's a 355. Okay, I'll jump on the start line and I even know it was going to happen. So you're a little bit of an odd duck when it comes to that sort of thing. What are your thoughts about our future as a ultra tri sport?
I think mostly it's going to stay regional. Yeah. I think we're going to lose a few events. Like obviously, I wanted to go race in India this year, but then I threw my hat into racing across Australia. But the Indians have a Ultraman race. There's a few very small, like the Dominican Republic has a small race, and my old sponsors, my old employers from Penticton, they all live there, so I've got a ready-made crew sitting in the Dominican Republic. But I think a lot of people won't travel. Americans tend not to travel outside the United States. So there's not a lot of Americans who actually travel to different, to international Ultramans, apart from Canada, obviously. I think I'm going to have to go to work shortly. So I'll throw in a bit of the pro thing. So for Hawaii specifically, the whole world looks at Hawaii Ultraman. It gets the most attention from everyone. And last year, Lionel Sanders, when he was trying to figure out his triathlon life, made a joke about maybe he should do Ultraman. And I'm screaming at my laptop going, Cheryl and Dave and Jane should have immediately offered him a spot, immediately, and said, we'll look after you. Because if you look at Kate Bevilacqua, for example, she got far more credit, and Ultraman races, 515's got far more exposure when Kate Bevilacqua won in Canada for the 515, or the 520, and beat the entire field than she ever did winning 4 Ironmans. So that made her career, and it made for a lot of media. So when you get a guy like Peter, and there have been a lot of pros, but I've never seen anything that matched what Kate Bevilacqua did. and it's made her career since then. She's got a great coaching business, and she's sponsored by Metasport in Singapore. So they're still flying over to Asia on the back of her Ultraman exploits.
Yeah. And depending on when this airs, Kate is a guest on my podcast, either before or after this, because I've already recorded that episode. So, I believe her whole thing was a real stepping stone for women in the sport as well.
Yeah.
Because that's the other part about 515 is that it is, 85% male. As we sit here on an all-male panel talking about it.
Exactly.
Not unironically, I think, the more women that get involved in the sport, hopefully in the future as well. One of the things I was trying to do when I came up with the Worldwide Championship was to keep the field at 50-50, so that there would be that opportunity, but there just aren't even that many women that want to come to the race. There aren't that many women at this point. I'll throw that in as an additional question, and maybe Steve King, from your perspective, what is it going to take to get more women involved in moving up to ultra?
Well, I'm glad that Nick brought that up about Kate, because when you think Amy Van Tassel, Antonina Reznikov, those women have both won outright as well at Ultraman distances. And so a big part of it is getting the message out there. And look at Didi Griesbauer, absolutely phenomenal, leading the race for a couple of days as well beforehand. I mean, this is the talent. And she is someone who we often hear when you're listening to live streaming. She's often one of the commentators. So she has a platform which could be used. And certainly we need to provide platforms for the athletes to be known. Simon has probably got the most out of it that I've seen of anyone. Richard Thompson, he was constantly posting, building up to the sub-20 performance as well. Maxim Nyashov with his 1950-29, I think it was, that he did at the Siberman there. That was last year. And so you've got unbelievable talent and possibility when it comes to the front of the field. But we've also got some people who are consistent. When Alexandra was talking about Sergio Cordero, you've got Vanusa Maciel. She ended up winning in Arizona. And so the possibilities are there, but again, funding needs to be there. When it comes to some of the pro athletes, some of them do get some funding, of course, but in order to qualify, and this is a difficult thing now, we've got 3 brilliant races to qualify, Florida, Arizona, and Canada, and Jen McRae does an absolutely magnificent job. Mm-hmm. And as you know, you guys did a wonderful job when you were working together with Brad, and now Brad's sort of running Ultraman Canada. So the talent for the race directing is there, but I think we've got to spread it out, because for Europeans, my goodness, for Australians, Kiwis, it's a long way to come. For South Africans, so somehow we've got to be able to spread these out so that maybe there's more that are allowed into the family. I know a few have tried to get into the family at different times, and the UK was part of the family, Australia was part of the family. So hopefully things can be done to rectify whatever's going on that maybe people have some conflicts with. And it's understandable. There's always going to be certain levels of conflicts, but everyone's in the sport for the right reason. That's what I found. And I love the people in the sport. And that's why, to me, 3-day racing at Ultraman distance events, they're the things I most look forward to. And I love races, believe me.
Kurt, do you have something you want to add? We haven't had anything from you in a little bit here. And as the very first Ultraman, I think probably your perspective is as long as they come. So, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really a complex equation. I mean, just to put it out there, it's really something that it's almost unpredictable. I think a couple things that if we go back to what Jeff said, that got a bucket list. How great would it be to go to Australia and make it a vacation? But that's kind of like for the general population, that's like a one and done because we all have a budget. Let's just put that out there. Got to go to Brazil and race there. I mean, any person will give their right arm to do that, but that's a big scale to climb. You've got to, first of all, find the time to prepare as an athlete and make sure that things are okay at home. There's no surprise there. Huge commitment. I think we've gotten a lot better. That's what I'm excited about now, is just training people for Ultramans. That we've come a long way from the 1980s. And I think also just trying to get more women involved. That's my big push. It's a rare find. I've got one person right now that's going to do Arizona. She's really excited. She's a novice, but it's finding someone like a Dee times 5. It's like back in the day with the Ironman. It was the big 4. Melina, Tinley, Dave Scott, and Mark Allen. We need to find that and scale it. I think the other thing too I find is that when people have a good experience at every race, or any race, the word travels very quickly. It's kind of like Martin Luther King. We didn't have internet when he was going to give his great speech, but at that day, the people that were there, they were not all African Americans. They had a belief in something, and they showed up in masses to hear his speech. Ours is no different. It is no different at all. The word travels very quickly in communities. Now, if it's a bad experience, there's a little bit of that there. The word gets around very quickly. So I think it's just trying to continue to be ambassadors for this distance. It's getting the word out, us taking some ownership on it. It's to spread the word, because I think in a perfect world, all of us would have this because we're a part of this family. When all the dust settles, I think our wish in life is to say, every person on this planet, they had the opportunity to be a part of this as a crew member, as a participant. Even Alexandre, it's funny, Alex, I go back to, he told the story in Hawaii, like he goes, God, I was in Rio in 1982 and there was this American there and I was like 17. I looked over at him and I saw how he put his goggles on. I guess that was me. I was like, I don't know, 24. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew, hey, I had a big race to start and I had to get after it. He said, but that one day, it made me believe that I could be a world champion. So planting those seeds and looking at the next generation to get more people, kind of create that pipeline, I think is so key. So I don't think we're in a bad spot. I think we're in a good spot right now. But even Ironman, because I'm now working very closely with Ironman, and just to be very candid, they're having to scale back their races because some of the races, they're just not making sense financially. So from a business standpoint, they've had to pull things in to have more quality. And I know the work I do with my coaches, the word comes up again, fewer races, more quality, and then still trying to hang on to a little bit of tradition. So I know I dumped a lot right there, but I don't have the 1, 2, 3. I've got this. I know it's going to happen. So I think we just kind of take it in stride. But things like this, Larry, what you're doing is key. Because we've got to collaborate. We've got to come together to say, we might agree to disagree on a few things, but at the end of the day, and the spirit of the sport, big picture, how it started, where it was, and where it is today, we're all here for the exact same reason. And we all play a really integral role from what Steve does to you do, with your podcast, every person throughout the world. It's like we're doing it here today. I mean, how incredible is that? Like 25 years ago, I think, Steve, we had Morse code. We had cement blocks. It wasn't going to happen. So let's take joy in where we are right now to say, we are doing the right thing. And I think it's going to attract more people. Last thing on the pros, I think it's a little bit tougher for pros. I think Simon has done great work, but really, as I work with a lot of athletes, I mean, here's the reality. If you're going to go in for the kill at any Ultraman distance race or 5:15 distance race, you've got to plan out a big block of time, a major block of time to go in for the kill. A little bit's going to be luck. You've got to execute it, have a little bit of luck over the 3 days, and then you've got to have that post recovery. If you look at how you're going to create revenue, let's be very candid. If you can get in shorter events and race frequently, you can pay a lot more bills that way versus I'll kind of throw the Hail Mary and hope and pray it all works out. I know there's no prize money there, but if I'm good at social media, I can leverage that. You never really know. I know for me, that was Steve. It's so funny we're having this conversation. When I was young, wild, and free, that was my number one question to Kurt Tyler. Is there any money in this race? He made it perfectly clear to me there is no money at all. And I got a little bit I got a little bit mouthy in my younger days, and I said, man, I can't pay bills because I had nothing. I was kind of a pro. I was working as a job. I had a wife, kids were on the way, and there was no money. But what it has brought me today, not in financial rewards, but that legacy and what it's turned into, that my network has turned into my net worth in a good way with people, with great memories, with just opening eyes to say, no, you can do this. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to do an Ultraman or do a 515. So anyway, that was kind of a random response, but I wanted to get out off my chest.
I think that was a perfect response. You really put it all together there for us.
But I think also, we have to remember that it gives a chance for the age grouper to go against the pro as well. And we saw in Canada a couple of years ago where there were 4 women in the top 5, first, second, fourth, and fifth. And then if you look at Hawaii this year, apart from Simon, Amy Robitaille and AA, they were second and third overall, as well as first and second in the women's division. So we went from third and fourth the year before with Didi. And so you look at that and you go, well, for the age group, or whether they're going in there to get sub 36 hours or sub 12 hours a day, to know that you're an Ultraman finisher is a very big deal. But if you're going to get serious at the front end and look towards potentially more sub 20-hour performances, it's got to be a value. And that's why someone like Leander Cave, when you look at her 5 world titles and looking to get an Ultraman world title, I think she realized it was not as easy, and I mean that in quotation marks, you know what I mean, as one would think. Coming here to qualify first and then going to the Big Island, it's a tough thing mentally, physically. You've got to have your crew fully together in every which way, doing the right thing. One mistake can ruin your event, or one crash, sadly, as we had one gentleman on the Big Island again, his second time of crashing on day 2, and very, very sad because he was one of the pre-race favorites as well.
Do any of you have any final thoughts that you want to pop in there, or we can just wrap it up and have a few minutes to chat?
Very quickly, I would say, of course, in a local perspective, when you look 5 years ahead, I don't think, I'm not an economist, but I don't think, the flight tickets will decrease. So I understand that, the local races will have the potential to get stronger and stronger. The other thing that we say, and I'm not very specialist on this, I know Kurt is, as I said, what we're observing, especially here in Brazil, we're observing 2 things. As Ironman has a lot of races now, people will get more people into triathlon, more people into 70.3 races, full distance races. And what we observed here in Brazil is that cycle period of time that we used to see while we were doing Ironman, maybe 7, 10, 15 years before you go to Ultraman. Here in Brazil, is much smaller. What we observe now is people with 3 Ironmans, 4 Ironmans, they are looking forward for an Ultraman race. So that we understand that also brings a potential to the local races. So if we have the chance, to by debating, by changing experiences, without what are mistakes and things that we did wrong, we have the opportunity to bring the 515 races, to a level in our local races, and that we never experienced before due to that. Flight tickets is expensive. A lot of Ironman races, of course, not the best way to say it, but generates a lot of potential, users for Ironman, and that cycle, experienced Ironman cycles, is much more now. To finish, when about the pros, I'm not the best person to say that, so we have to use a local experience. But what we observe here in Brazil with our pro athletes here in Brazil, experience in the Ultraman race, and the DOB 515 race here in Brazil, is that somehow they are, I won't say disappointed, but something is going on with their experience, even if it's an Ironman or thing. So they're looking for something different, and they come to Ultraman. And one thing that we observe and we talk to them is say that, look, you got to have it. If you're looking for experience, you're welcome. But please, you have to be aware that this race is our objective is for this race to bring you a new significant way of seeing triathlon. And what we observe really here in Brazil is that these guys, these men, they go back to Ironman and they're happy. They're very happy because, again, the race, the event as a way, not in itself. So, the other races challenge Ironman and other races here in Brazil, they have a different meaning. So it's more about what we say to them is much less about what the event is going to give you, but much more what you're looking for it. So for pro races, pro athletes in 5 years, I personally I don't believe they won't come to populate our races unless they are in some contests in their personal lives. They want to see something different, and that goes on. Sorry for taking the time, but that was my final thoughts.
Yeah, I very much agree with what Alex is getting at there. So I deal with a lot of pros with my shorter course race. And then I've had, particularly Simon come and do UM. Now, Simon's a very unique athlete. He's an absolute freak of an athlete, but he also has this part of him that wanted that UM. He wanted the experience. He was coming for a challenge. Richard Thompson had thrown it down. He had Carl Reed for support, but Simon, a very unique and amazing guy, and absolutely got everything out of that race that all our people that take 36 hours got. Simon very much got that. To me, he very much was methodical about it, but it wasn't a job. Coming to do UM wasn't a job for Simon. He wanted to do it and do it well, but he absolutely embraced everything that we know these races are. So I think what Alex is saying is some pros don't. They are there to race, to win, to get exposure. And I don't think we need to be, for want of a better description, used like that. If people want to come and race fast, that's great. But people like Simon came with absolutely the right intent and still took as much away from that race as the other, 45, 50 people did over that weekend when he killed that time in Australia last year. So, yeah, it's treaded carefully there, I think.
Well, I think one of the things that race directors can help do is look for pros who are near the end of their career. If you look at even Simon, he knows he can be near the top of the game, but not necessarily in the top three now in an Ironman race. However, some of these guys are considering, what do I do from here? But before they do step back from their career, they're probably also asking themselves, is there anything I would regret not doing at this point? And if you look at what's out there, this is the biggie. Beyond not just the distance, but the 3-day aspect, the crew aspect, the bringing the family together, to embracing the sport as it used to be in many ways as well. And that's what I think we need to look at. You look at Chris McDonald, another pro triathlete from the past who, he won Florida in 2019. And his brother's done it. So it's been wonderful to see the names that are appearing. But I think from a race director's point of view, if you know you've got an elite athlete or has been an elite athlete who's getting to that point in their career where they're going to be stepping back, I would say send them a notice. Let them know you'll be keen on hosting them. Find a homestay for them. Let them know you've got a vehicle of your own that you'd be willing to let a crew use, anything to bring them there, because it adds luster to the cluster in terms of social media as well.
Yeah. And Kurt, I'll just follow up with that by saying, hey, why don't you come over to Whistler?
Yeah, I'll see if I can squeeze that in. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to be in agreement with Steve. It's a good way to have your career sunset, to check that one more big box to say, hey, I am definitely done now. So yeah, we just need more time with you, Larry, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that was all the time that we had for this roundtable discussion. I hope that you enjoyed hearing from our panel. I really thought it was a great discussion, and I think that I will be doing more of these. If you have a topic that you think could be handled by a group better than just a single person, please let me know and I will see if we can get the right people together to talk about that. If you want to hear more from any of my guests today, as I said off the top, they have all appeared at least once on the podcast in the past. So check out the show notes for the links to their other episodes. Take us out, MJ.
Hey, if you liked what you heard today, please tell a friend and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you'd rate and review the show while you're there. Drop the names of the people you think we should interview and we'll get in touch with them and make that happen. Thank you for listening to 515, the Ultra Podcast, a production of 55 Enterprises. Now really, go subscribe now before you forget.